Have you ever come home and realized your house might not be yours anymore? That sounds dramatic, right? That's exactly what 34-year-old Danielle Brooks thought too, until last Thursday evening, when she pulled into her driveway after a long shift at the pediatric clinic and pressed the garage remote like she had done 1,000 times before. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Click. Nothing. No motor sound. No movement. Just silence. At first, Danielle assumed the remote battery had died. It happens. She even shook it once out of habit, like somehow that might bring it back to life. She pressed it again. Still nothing. Now here's where things started to feel wrong. Danielle looked up toward the garage and noticed something that absolutely had not been there when she left for work that morning. A keypad, mounted neatly on the wall beside the garage door. Clean. New. Installed professionally. And definitely not hers. Let me ask you something. If you saw something new attached to your home, something you didn't approve, didn't buy, didn't install, would your first thought be a mistake? Or would it be fear? Danielle told herself it had to be a mix-up. Maybe the HOA had scheduled something. Maybe maintenance had come early. But then she heard it. A sound that made her stomach drop so fast she actually felt dizzy. Her engine. Starting. Inside the garage. Danielle's entire body went still. Because she hadn't started it. And she definitely hadn't given anyone permission to be inside her garage. Before she could even reach for her phone, the garage door began to lift from the inside slowly, deliberately, like someone was opening it to leave. And then she saw him. A man she had never seen before. Sitting in the driver's seat of her car. Backing out calmly like this was the most normal thing in the world. He stopped when he saw her standing in the driveway. Rolled down the window. Looked at her with confusion, no panic, no guilt, just mild irritation. Like she was the one in the wrong place. And then he said 6 words that would turn her entire life upside down. The title's in my name. Except Danielle knew one thing about that title that this stranger didn't, and what she discovered next would change everything. How do you respond when someone calmly tells you that your home belongs to them? Danielle didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there in her own driveway, keys still in her hand, staring at the man who had just backed her 2019 Honda Accord out of her garage like he paid the mortgage. He stepped out of the car slowly. Measured movements. No rush. No fear. Up close, he looked ordinary. Early 40s. Clean jeans. Button-down shirt. Wedding ring. This wasn't some masked intruder. This was someone who looked like he'd just finished a Home Depot run. I think you're mistaken, he said, almost politely. This is my house. My house. Danielle felt a strange mix of anger and disbelief bubbling up. She told him her name. Told him she had bought this place 3 years ago after her divorce. Told him the blue hydrangeas by the porch were planted in memory of her mom. He didn't react. Instead, he pulled out his phone. Danielle Brooks, he asked. Her stomach tightened. He showed her a document on the screen. A warranty deed. Filed with the county. Dated 6 weeks ago. Transfer of property from Danielle Brooks to Marcus Hale, age 41. That was his name. And there, at the bottom of the document, was her signature. Except it wasn't. It looked like hers. The loops. The slant. The way she crosses her T's. But she hadn't signed anything. Marcus wasn't acting like a criminal. That was the unsettling part. He even offered to show her the email thread with the seller. A woman claiming to be Danielle. A remote closing. Wire transfer completed. Keys mailed. He had receipts. Contracts. A cashier's wire confirmation for $210,000. Let me ask you something. If you had just wired your life savings to buy a house, would you calmly hand the keys back to someone standing in the driveway? Probably not. Danielle called the police. Her hands were shaking now. When the officers arrived and ran the address through the county database, one of them looked up at her with something that felt like pity. Because according to public record, Danielle Brooks was no longer the legal owner of the house she was standing in front of. But what they discovered next made this situation far worse than a simple paperwork error, and no one saw it coming. How do you steal a house without ever stepping inside it? That was the question running through Danielle's mind as one of the officers gently asked her to move aside so they could speak with Marcus privately. Her driveway, her front lawn, and suddenly she was being treated like a visitor. The officer returned a minute later holding his tablet, his tone careful now, measured. The kind of voice people use when they're about to say something that doesn't make sense. The property was transferred 6 weeks ago through a warranty deed, he explained. Recorded with the county clerk's office. It appears legal. Appears. Danielle felt her throat tighten. Legal meant paperwork. Paperwork meant signatures. Signatures meant someone had been pretending to be her. Marcus explained that he had purchased the property through an online listing advertised as a private foreclosure sale. The price was below market, but not suspiciously low. Just enough to feel like a good deal. He'd never met the seller in person. Everything was remote. Digital ID verification. Online notarization. Electronic signatures. Fast. Clean. Professional. Too professional. Danielle suddenly remembered an email she had received about 2 months ago. Supposedly from her mortgage company. Asking her to confirm her login details due to suspicious activity. She almost deleted it. But she didn't. Have you ever clicked a link you weren't 100% sure about, just because it looked official? That single moment was now echoing loudly in her head. Because once someone has access to your personal information, your full name, your date of birth, your social security number, they don't need to break into your home. They can transfer it, sell it, replace you on paper. One of the officers then asked her a question that made her stomach drop. Had she noticed anything unusual with her mail recently? And that's when it hit her. Credit card statements that stopped coming. A property tax notice she never received. A bank letter that showed up opened and resealed. Someone hadn't just been pretending to be her online. They had been intercepting her identity in real life. But what Danielle didn't know yet was that the person using her name had already taken things one step further, and what came next would change everything. What if the person standing in your driveway, driving your car, is also a victim? That's exactly what Danielle discovered about Marcus Hale. He wasn't some con artist trying to steal her life. He had paid nearly $210,000 in cash for what he thought was a legitimate foreclosure. Movers were scheduled for the weekend. Utilities were already transferred, insurance activated. Even a locksmith had reprogrammed the garage keypad. Marcus had acted in good faith every step of the way. Danielle couldn't believe it. Here was a stranger, calmly explaining receipts, contracts, emails, all signed by someone pretending to be her. Someone who had somehow forged her identity so convincingly that every official system had accepted it. This wasn't a robbery with crowbars. This was a digital and paper takeover. A quiet, invisible theft where the house itself wasn't even touched. And then came the shocker. The scammers hadn't stopped at the property transfer. Using the same fake ownership records, they had applied for a home equity line of credit, approved for $95,000. Withdrawn 2 days ago. Danielle's name. Danielle's credit. Danielle's debt. She felt like her world had turned upside down. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. But mostly, she felt powerless. Marcus showed her every detail: bank statements, notarized deeds, emails with the fraudulent seller. He had no idea the documents were fake until Danielle arrived in the driveway. Yet, despite being an innocent buyer, he now risked legal complications because he was technically the current owner. Danielle couldn't believe the audacity of whoever had done this. Someone had meticulously forged her identity, faked documents, and taken control of her home, all without ever stepping inside. And the scariest part? If Danielle hadn't come home that evening, she might never have known. Marcus might have moved in, transferred utilities, and all of it would have seemed legitimate. Weeks of stolen peace. Months of invisible chaos. The officer gave Danielle the only advice he could: start identity monitoring immediately, contact the title company, alert her bank, and prepare for a long legal fight. But Danielle also realized something chilling. No alarm system, no cameras, no locks would have stopped this. It was invisible, untraceable, and perfectly legal, until proven otherwise. So now the question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Who really had the right to live in the house, and who would be left with nothing? That night, Danielle didn't sleep in her own home. Not because it was haunted. Not because the man who had driven her car was still there. Because legally, it wasn't hers anymore. For months, she would replay that moment in the driveway, the engine starting without her, the garage door lifting from the inside, the man's calm voice saying, "The title's in my name." She kept asking herself the same question over and over. How could someone take her house without touching it? Without forcing a lock? Without breaking in? The investigation dragged on. Each phone call, each email from the title company felt like walking through quicksand. Eventually, the courts confirmed what Danielle had feared and hoped for at the same time. The forged deed was invalid. Marcus, the stranger in her driveway, was removed as the owner, but only because he could prove he was a good-faith buyer. The legal system worked, eventually, but it didn't undo the damage. Her house was hers again. But the home equity line of credit that had been opened in her name? That debt still lingered. Her credit score had been dinged. Her trust shattered. For months, she had to rebuild not just paperwork, but peace of mind. Danielle took several steps to protect herself. Title monitoring. Identity theft alerts. Credit freezes. She installed cameras, changed passwords, and started checking her accounts obsessively. Every sound in the house, every unexpected knock at the door, made her jump. It wasn't paranoia, it was awareness. Awareness born from someone literally stepping into her life without ever meeting her. And here's the thing. The scariest part wasn't Marcus. It wasn't even the thief who forged her identity. The scariest part was the invisible nature of the crime. Someone had taken over her life using only paperwork, emails, and her personal information. No forced entry. No alarms. No physical evidence until Danielle came home and saw it with her own eyes. So think about this. How long would it take for you to notice if someone filed paperwork claiming your home? Weeks? Months? Or only when a stranger rolls out of your garage and tells you, "The title's in my name"? Danielle's story is a reminder that security isn't just about locks or alarms. It's about vigilance, paperwork, and never taking your identity for granted. If this story made you check your own locks, your credit, or even your property records tonight, then Danielle's nightmare has done its job. Because sometimes, the most dangerous break-ins don't require a key, they only require access to your name.